Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 110 based on novel. So let's start. At the moment when the indifferent voice came, the look on Xiao Yang's face could not help but change, and the action in his hand also stagnated. Feeling the cold indifference in the words, Xiao Yang's heart couldn't help feeling a sense of fear. This person's strength, but the worst must be a strong man fighting the emperor. Who? Elder, younger Xiao Yang, there is no malice in offending the elder's territory today. I just hope I can use it. Put away the strange fire in front of him. Xiao Yang quickly arched his hand respectfully at the surrounding emptiness and swept around the world with his eyes. Sure enough, he didn't see each other's figure, and even the specific direction of the sound could not be recognized. Between the world and the world, he couldn't detect even the slightest breath of each other. The guy who made a sudden noise was like an ethereal wind, which was traceless. Oh, but since you only came by way, what's the matter with her? Why is she hurt? If you can't say it, you'll die. The indifferent voice did not have the slightest emotion, and Xiao Yang was not surprised to hear the cold killing intention. He would not doubt every word the elder said. If he couldn't answer, the other party would definitely kill him before he reacted. With this in mind, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing bitterly. He didn't know whether it was right or wrong to ask Murong Chanshan to bring him in this time. The other party even wanted human life when he opened his mouth, which really made him flattered. Turning his head and looking at Murong Chanshan lying on his back behind him, Xiao Yang couldn't help smiling bitterly at the corners of his mouth and whispered, "Why don't you say it?" Smell speech, the girl just looked at Xiao Yang's eyes and immediately turned around. Her eyes were covered on Xiao Yang's back, which made Xiao Yang feel helpless. Murong Chanshan's attitude was equivalent to pushing him to the guillotine. Cough. After coughing twice, Xiao Yang respectfully arched his hand at the surrounding sky, and immediately said again, "Go back to the elder, Murong Chanshan, she. That's enough. I've just given you time, but since you don't want to answer my question, that's it. Break into my field. Now the people who hurt the king are still human. Boy, die." Hiss. At the moment when the voice of indifferent words fell, a sharp wind suddenly rang through the world. At the same time, the look on Xiao Yang's face also changed sharply. When he thought about it, Xiao Yang wanted to dodge, but then, Xiao Yang found that his body had been forcibly imprisoned in place by a terrorist force. In the face of this injury, Xiao Yang was unavoidable. At the same time of the huge shock in his heart, Xiao Yang had to shout Jiuyu in his heart. After all, looking at the posture of the people in front of him, it doesn't seem to be fun at all. If Jiuyu doesn't show up, he's afraid he won't have the slightest chance to survive. With the power contained in this blow, if it really falls on Xiao Yang, let alone live, it will be difficult to leave a whole corpse. In the twinkling of an eye, the terrible wind had fallen from the sky. In the twinkling of an eye, it was only a short distance of less than 10 feet from Xiao Yang's head. It was about to fall on Xiao Yang. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang knew that there was no possibility to avoid, and Guyo couldn't rely on it. At this time, he had to rely on himself. The thought moved, Xiao Yang's body was shocked fiercely, and the blood of the dragon phoenix in his body was excited at the moment. In a twinkling, the ancient armor of the dragon phoenix had covered Xiao Yang's whole body. At the same time, the body of King Kongglass was also displayed at the moment. In a twinkling, Xiao Yang's body imprisoned in place was able to live. Drink. For Xiao Yang, the best defense is a bold attack. In the face of danger, it's better to go all out than wait for the moment of death. Even if you die, you must pay the price for it. Drink. With a wave of Xiao Yang's big hand, Shen Chongkai received the ring. At the same time, the gorgeous strange fire quickly condensed in Xiao Yang's hand. With a wave of Xiao Yang's big hand turned into a King Kong giant god, the fighting spirit in his huge palm gathered wildly. Then, when the terrible wind was about to fall, "Sister Bing Shuang, no." At the critical moment, I thought there would be an earth-shaking terrorist bombardment. However, in fact, what I got was Murong Chanshan's roar. At the same time, Murong Chanshan's delicate body has blocked Xiao Yang's head, and he wants to use his body to resist this fatal blow for Xiao Yang. Hiss. In an instant, the terrible strong wind that had fallen in front of Murong Chanshan's delicate body suddenly stopped in a fierce wind. Immediately, the terrible strong wind was easily dissolved and dispersed, revealing a beautiful woman wearing a long ice blue dress, long ice blue hair and snow-white skin. The woman has a beautiful face that can be called peerless. Her lips are like exciting pills. Her small and tall nose bridge further sets off the beauty of her cheeks. She has willow eyebrows and phoenix eyes, and a pair of cold blue beautiful eyes, which not only makes her beautiful, but also adds some sense of hegemony like a king. Seeing the beautiful woman in front of her, Murong Qianqian's pretty face immediately showed a happy smile. Her delicate body moved and held the woman in front of her tightly. On the latter's originally indifferent cheek, a rare smile appeared with Murong Qianqian's hug. If these gorgeous women walk outside, they will inevitably attract countless men to fall for them and are willing to do anything for them. I'm afraid even some famous strong people will be moved by their beauty. Of course, if anyone wants to kiss Fangzi, he must be stronger than her first. After all, this ice beauty with peerless appearance is not a vase that looks like her beauty. Her strength is enough to make the whole western region tremble. However, while holding the ice beauty and Murong Qianqian together, Xiao Yan below, the fighting skills that have been released in his hands are like an arrow from the string, and there is no possibility of recovery. In the twinkling of an eye, that terrible palm, carrying all the fighting spirit left in Xiao Yan's body, bombarded the two beauties less than 10 feet above. For the blow out of this palm, Xiao Yan's face at the moment also quickly showed a look of anxiety. How did he know that at this critical moment, Murong Qianqian would suddenly jump out and use his body to block the blow for him? At this moment, the situation seems irreversible. Be careful. With a shock, the sky drank hard, and the huge golden palm print less than a foot away from Murong Qianqian and his two people immediately stagnated in the void. Looking up, I only saw that the ice beauty raised her white jade hand and stretched out her 5 fingers. At the same time, an invisible force swept out of her palm and forcibly imprisoned the huge golden handprint in the void. Bang! The next moment, with the gentle grip of the ice beauty's jade hand, the huge golden handprint burst with a bang, and immediately turned into a pure fighting spirit and returned to Xiao Yang's body again. With a bang, the huge golden fingerprints dispersed, turned into pure fighting spirit again, and returned to the cyclone in Xiao Yang's body. At the same time, the feeling of weakness in Xiao Yang's body also dispersed. When the golden light dispersed, Xiao Yang recovered his body, while the Dragon Phoenix ancient armor still covered Xiao Yang's body to deal with any sudden changes. Who? Xiao Yang took a deep breath with a little effort. Then he looked up. Immediately, his eyes could not help but coagulate suddenly. At this moment, I only saw the ice beauty, who took back her delicate jade hand as white as warm jade. At the same time, her eyelids were gently raised, and her ice blue eyes were slowly raised. With an indifferent color, she looked at Xiao Yang, who was shooting her eyes at her at this time. Their eyes touched in the void. At that moment, even if Xiao Yanli felt an extremely terrible breath, he quickly shrouded himself. Just as soon as he touched, the fear of power had made his body unstable. Standing in the void, Xiao Yang's steps were unstable. He couldn't help but withdraw a few steps backward. Then he stabilized his figure again. Looking at the woman, he was also filled with a look of horror. The strength of the woman in front of him is really terrible. Obviously, the one in front of him will never be an ordinary emperor fighting strong man. I'm afraid her strength is at least equal to that of the 4 main sect. 8 stars. With this in mind, Xiao Yang could not help shaking fiercely. The 8-star dude, at this level, is the real top strongman in the western regions. Unexpectedly, he only came to the western regions for more than 2 years. He saw almost all the top powers in the western regions, but he didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse. While Xiao Yang was thinking secretly, the ice beauty snorted, raised her jade hand again, and wanted to point out to Xiao Yang. Seeing the ice beauty raised her hand again, the look on Xiao Yang's face also changed rapidly, and his steps unconsciously retreated half a step. At the same time, the fighting spirit in his body also ran quickly. No matter what the other party's purpose is, if he wants to kill him, Xiao Yang will never wait to die. Even if the other party is a strong fighter, he can never be the opponent. Sister Bingshuang, don't kill him. My injury is eaten by late cold jade. It's none of Xiao Yang's business. Moreover, he has saved me many times along the way. He is my life-saving benefactor. You must not kill him. Seeing that Sister Bingshuang in front of her put on a posture of killing Xiao Yang, Murong Qianqian's pretty face was in a hurry. He quickly held the jade hand stretched out by Bingshuang in his arms and pressed it down. He also shouted in a hurry for fear that Sister Bingshuang in front of her would really kill Xiao Yang. When she saw Murong Qianqian protecting the human being called Xiao Yang behind her, Bingshuang could not help but frown. However, when she saw the pleading color in the girl's eyes, a beautiful smile like iceberg snow lotus appeared on her icy pretty face. Seeing this scene, The anxious look on Murong Qianqian's pretty face dissipated. He put on a happy smile again and hugged the frost in front of him again. At the same time, his small mouth snuggled up to the frost's ear and said with a smile, "He, I'll wait until Sister Bingshuang is the best." Smelling the speech, a smile appeared again on the frost's beautiful cheeks, and the beautiful eyes closed gently. It seemed that they were enjoying the meeting with the girl again at the moment. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang couldn't help but breathe a long breath in his heart. It seems that it should be all right. With a smile, Xiao Yang's heart moved. His body has run to the fighting qi all over his body, and he quickly returned to the cyclone in his body. But at the next moment, when the frost opened his eyes again, the ice-blue beautiful eyes were still filled with the same indifferent color as before. At the same time, the jade hand raised, bent his fingers, and a strange and incomparable fighting spirit practice, which shot at Xiao Yang like a lightning bolt. At the moment of Xiao Yang's recovery, the dark pupil suddenly contracted to the size of the tip of a needle. The look on his face also changed sharply at this moment. The whole body solidified in place at this moment, even the breath between his nose. The next moment, Murong Qianqian, holding the frost, also quickly found the action in the frost's hand just now. Immediately, on the pretty face that just appeared with a smile, his face became pale at this moment. Anxiously, she broke free from the frost in front of her. The girl immediately turned and looked at Xiao Yang behind her. In a pair of water-lingling eyes, it was also red at the moment. Crystal tears kept spinning between her eyes, as if they might fall at any time. At this time, Xiao Yang was stunned in his heart for a moment, and then returned to his mind. Looking at his body, he never thought that under the blow of the ice beauty, the blow would be unharmed. At the same time, Murong Qianqian also noticed Xiao Yang, who looked stunned at the moment. Suddenly, the big stone held high in the girl's heart also fell suddenly at this moment. "Since Chen said that you saved her life several times, I won't investigate your intrusion into the king's territory this time. These will be regarded as another compensation for you." After all, the road was borrowed by the little girl. Just when Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian were stunned by this, Frost's slightly indifferent voice suddenly came. Hearing this, Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian immediately woke up. It turned out that Frost didn't mean to kill Xiao Yang. Knowing this, Xiao Yang and Murong Qianqian could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, Xiao Yang couldn't help frowning. From the words of Bingshuang just now, Xiao Yang didn't understand the compensation she said. Just as Xiao Yang was about to ask, a terrible wave of fighting spirit burst out of Xiao Yang's body. Under this wave of fighting spirit, even Xiao Yang's body couldn't help shaking slightly. The fighting spirit directly passed through Xiao Yang's body and swept across the void. While these fighting spirits rose in Xiao Yang's body, Xiao Yang's breath also rose rapidly. In a few short breaths, Xiao Yang's strength has been completely stable just after entering the middle of the 5-star and half emperor. However, the power filled in the fighting spirit is far more than that. As the fighting spirit continues to gush out, the breath in Xiao Yang's body is also rising rapidly, straight at the 6-star and half emperor. Above the void, Xiao Yang's face suddenly changed and felt the crazy rising breath in his body. Xiao Yang was both surprised and shocked. For this sudden power, even with Xiao Yang's mind, he can't help feeling a little unreal. After all, I'm afraid no one can easily believe this power. There is no such thing as pie falling from the sky in this world. But today, it seems that Xiao Yang really met him. Xiao Yang, refine those fighting spirits quickly. Seeing that Xiao Yang was all right, Murong Qianqian felt relieved at first. Even if he noticed the abnormality in Xiao Yang's body at the moment, a surprised smile suddenly appeared on his pretty face. He quickly reminded Xiao Yang that it seemed that this fighting spirit improved her strength. Behind Murong Qianqian, Bingshuang looked at Murong Qianqian in front of her. Her cold cheeks showed a doting look, and the corners of her mouth rose, revealing a shallow smile. Immediately, the frost again set his eyes on Xiao Yang. At the same time, the doting look in his eyes gradually dissipated and changed into the same indifferent color as before. Hearing Murong Qianqian's words, Xiao Yang's face was slightly stunned. Immediately after thinking for a moment, he no longer hesitated. He sat cross-legged in the void and closed his eyes. At the same time, Xiao Yang's mind moved. The burning formula skill in his body quickly ran to the extreme and quickly refined the terrible fighting spirit that appeared in his body at the moment. Hoo! In Xiao Yang's body, the cyclone is turning like a windmill at a high speed. At the same time, a surge of fighting spirit surges out of Xiao Yang's body. Under the operation of Xiao Yang's burning formula skill, it quickly moves to all meridians in his body, then becomes refined rapidly through the crazy refining of different fire, and finally merges into Xiao Yang's cyclone again, become a part of Xiao Yang's strength. With Xiao Yang's repeated refining, those fighting spirits gradually integrated into Xiao Yang's body, and Xiao Yang's breath gradually became thick. At the same time, the outside world, ice frost, came to Murong Qianqian again. The indifferent ice-blue eyes slowly moved away from Xiao Yang, turned into a soft and looked at Murong Qianqian. You little girl, I haven't seen you for years. You pushed me away for a man. You really value sex over friends. Say, do you like him? Frost looked at Murong Qianqian with a smile, and a rare funny smile appeared on her pretty face. Hearing the words from Bing Shuang's mouth, Murong Qianqian's pretty face suddenly turned crimson. With a white look of Bing Shuang, he buried his small head. At the same time, he retorted in a low voice. No, it's just that he saved my life. I want to repay him. It's so simple. It's not as much as you think. Your ears are red. In my opinion, your so-called reward is to promise each other by example. At the same time, Frost stretched out her slender fingers, gently pulled Murong Qianqian's delicate ears at her fingertips, pulled the girl's pretty face in front of her, stared at the latter with loving eyes, and smiled even more. No, I just think he's a little different. He's different from any so-called genius I've ever seen. He's very special, very special. Gently twisted her little head, the girl broke free from the arms of Frost, looked softly at Xiao Yang, and her eyes were a little colorful. Oh, special, haha. It seems that all the little girls who fall into the emotional river will think that person is very special. In this regard, Frost did not have too many ideas, but simply thought that this was only Murong Qianqian's unilateral view. No, he's different. Murong Qianqian shook her head. This time, she looked at the Frost. The two women looked at each other with 4 eyes. When Bing Shuang saw the strange look in Murong Qianqian's eyes, she couldn't help but slightly pick her eyebrows. The willow eyebrows frowned gently, and her cheeks showed a curious look. Then Murong Qianqian took a deep breath and looked at Xiao Yang again. A strange color reappeared in her beautiful eyes, saying, Sister Bing Shuang, have you ever seen a 5-star and half emperor who killed 9-star and half emperors? Huh. This time, Murong Qianqian's voice just fell, and the look on Frost's cheek changed instantly. The ice-blue pupil suddenly contracted at the moment, and a touch of shock appeared on his cold pretty face. Then, his eyes hurried to look at Xiao Yang, and the color of horror in his eyes was self-evident. With him? Kill the 9-star and half emperor? After a good film, Frost asked with an unbelievable frown. At the same time, the ice cream also narrows its eyes into a thin line, staring at Xiao Yang. There is a little strange light in the depths of the ice-blue pupils. Not only that, Sister Bing Shuang knows that even the East Wall incident was finally solved by Xiao Yang. Then Murong Qianqian continued. Smell speech, Frost beautiful eyes light lift, eyes flow, but nodded. On the other hand, with the crazy refining of fighting qi in the body, Xiao Yang's breath has become stronger and stronger. In a twinkling of an eye, it has reached the level of the peak of the 5-star and half emperor, which is only 1 step away from the real 6-star and half emperor. At the same time, Murong Qianqian kept telling Ice Cream all the information he knew about Xiao Yang. His pretty face was covered with smiles, as if he was showing off something to the latter. In this regard, Bing Shuang seemed to listen with interest. At the same time, she couldn't help showing a little surprise when she looked at Xiao Yang. In the twinkling of an eye, half a day has passed. Xiao Yang's crazy refining continues, and his breath becomes more and more thick. As for Murong Qianqian and Frost, he still keeps talking. You say, he is also a herbalist. Hearing the key part, Frost's cheek couldn't help looking a little moved, his eyes lifted up instantly, looked at Murong Qianqian, and asked aloud. Well, and he is also a second-class herbalist. His second level, at his age, becomes a second-level herbalist. Even in those herbalists' associations, it can be regarded as a peerless demon with terrible talent for refining medicine. Murong Qianqian's words made Frost take a cool breath in his mouth. On his beautiful face, he showed a surprised look at Xiao Yang for the first time. However, just when Murong Qianqian wanted to speak to Bing Shuang again, Bing Shuang suddenly frowned and immediately looked at Xiao Yang. And Murong Qianqian, who was on one side, immediately turned his eyes to Xiao Yang after being a little stunned. Bang! Invisibly, in Xiao Yang's body, sitting on the void, it seemed that something suddenly burst. Suddenly, between heaven and earth, a stream of energy from heaven and earth gathered frantically against Xiao Yang sitting on the void at the moment. The turbulent energy storm condensed into a huge energy vortex over Xiao Yang's head. With the rapid operation of the burning formula skill in Xiao Yang's body, a stream of heaven and earth energy poured into Xiao Yang's body from above Xiao Yang's head, and then formed a pure fighting spirit through the refining of different fire, then it merged into the cyclone in Xiao Yang's body. This crazy absorption and refining process lasted for 2 hours before it gradually stopped. At this time, the breath in Xiao Yang's body has been completely stable in the early days of the 6-star-and-half Emperor. He has a thick breath, which makes people dare not underestimate it at the first sight. Now, will you enter the 6-star-and-half Emperor? Slowly opened his eyes, Xiao Yang felt the thick breath from his body, and couldn't help whispering. He never thought that he would break through to the 6-star-and-half Emperor so soon. However, the feeling of becoming stronger makes Xiao Yang's mouth smile. At the moment, I don't know how much stronger I am than I was 1 day ago. 6-star-and-half Emperor can't be compared with 5-star-and-half Emperor. On the cold wind whistling void, Xiao Yang slowly withdrew from the cultivation state. Immediately, his body twisted and stood up. Feeling the feeling of fullness in his body at the moment, Xiao Yang couldn't help but show a smile at the corners of his mouth. Immediately, his fists were suddenly clenched, his body was shocked, and an invisible momentum spread rapidly from Xiao Yang. Under the pressure of this momentum, the void around Xiao Yang's body can't help but be distorted. The mighty pressure is much stronger than Xiao Yang 1 day ago. The 6-star-and-half Emperor, indeed, is not easily comparable to the 5-star-and-half Emperor. Seeing the abnormal state in the surrounding void, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing. Immediately, his eyes turned. The happy color just showed on his face was quickly pressed down by Xiao Yang. A pair of dark eyes without waves in ancient wells looked at the frost not far from Xiao Yang at the moment. Younger generation Xiao Yang, thank you for your kindness. Although the other party does have a pair of girlish cheeks, Xiao Yang naturally understands that he can cultivate to such a level. The latter is worthy of Xiao Yanggong's respectful call, both in strength and age. You don't have to thank me. The king said that this is compensation and reward. Now that you have entered the hinterland of Shalin Mountains and gained strength, please leave. Smelling the speech, the frost-beautiful eyes glanced at Xiao Yang, and immediately said in a cold voice. While the words fell, the frost big sleeve waved and the cold wind blew, and wanted to leave with Murong Qianqian. For the words of frost, Xiao Yang couldn't help frowning slightly, and an embarrassed color appeared between his eyebrows. It's not that he doesn't want to leave here. It's just that even though his strength has broken through the 6-star-and-half Emperor, he still can't pass through the hinterland of Shalin alone. Without Jiuyu's help, I'm afraid it would be very difficult for him to enter the center of the hinterland of Shalin Mountains, let alone cross here. Don't you want to leave? Do you still want to pester my Qianqian? Seeing Xiao Yang frown, the frost is cold again. This time, Xiao Yang clearly realizes that the temperature between the days of the week has decreased a lot. Boy, don't think you are qualified to speak with the king when you break through the 6-star-and-half Emperor. Don't forget that your strength is promoted by the king. The voice of words filled with indifference resounded again. The whole heaven and earth trembled slightly at the moment. Between heaven and earth, transparent ice spikes gradually condensed and formed with the change of mood of ice and frost. All the sharp ice spikes point to Xiao Yang. The cold light reflected seems to make the temperature between heaven and earth more cloudy and cold. Seeing the countless ice spikes between heaven and earth, the look on Xiao Yang's face quickly became dignified. He has no doubt that these ordinary ice spikes are enough to turn all his means into nothingness. Under these ice spikes, he is afraid he can't last a second. At the same time, Xiao Yang also looked at the frost with a dignified face. When he was about to speak, Murong Qianqian, standing beside the frost, stood again. Her delicate body stood in front of the frost. On her smiling face a moment ago, there was a touch of pale again. A pair of beautiful eyes full of water vapor quickly looked at the frost, and the slender jade hand held the white jade arm of the frost like a lotus root. At the same time, the mouth also quickly shouted, "Sister Bingshuang, you don't know the terrible cold wind. Now the cold jade is broken. You let Xiao Yang leave alone. How can he be able to get through here?" Smelling the speech, the frost's beautiful eyes opened gently and looked at the girl in front of him. When he noticed the sad color in the latter's beautiful eyes, he couldn't help sighing in his heart. Immediately, he looked at Xiao Yang with no change on his cheeks, his eyes narrowed and said in a frozen voice, "Listen to Qianqian, didn't you seal the crack in the east wall before? Since you have the ability to seal the crack, I think it shouldn't be difficult to pass through the hinterland of Shalin mountain range." Hearing Frost's words, Xiao Yang's eyes suddenly coagulated slightly. Unexpectedly, Murong Chanxian had told the woman in front of him. At present, he couldn't help tightening his heart. Immediately, Xiao Yang looked at the frost. At the same time, a little cold orn appeared on the latter's indifferent cheek. Seeing this, Xiao Yang's eyes narrowed slowly, and his face showed a firm color, saying, "You don't have to say much, sir. It's a great favor to send me luck. I'll finish the rest of the way by myself. You two leave." The voice in Xiao Yang's mouth fell, so he turned and wanted to fly away towards the western sky. "Xiao Yang, wait." When Xiao Yang turned around, Murong Chanxian called Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang raised his eyebrows and looked at the latter. At the same time, Murong Chanxian also looked at the frost on one side. The look on his pretty face seemed a little anxious at this moment, and hurriedly said to the frost, "Sister Frost. Miss Murong, no need. I'm enough for the next road. In addition, thank you for bringing me into the hinterland of Shilin." However, Murong Chanxian's words just came out, and Xiao Yang's insipid voice came immediately. The next moment, when Murong Chanxian immediately turned his head and looked at Xiao Yang, the latter stepped on the void with a fierce foot. When his body moved, it turned into a stream of wind and disappeared in front of Frost and Murong Chanxian. Seeing Xiao Yang disappear, Murong Chanxian's pretty face suddenly changed. His mouth was slightly open, and the words in his mouth failed to spit out after all. Looking at the direction of Xiao Yang's departure, the girl's eyes couldn't help but burst into a look of worry. On the side of the frost, there was a deep shock on the cold cheek at this time. Others may not know Xiao Yang's body method fighting skills, but she, at her level, how could she not know this body method fighting skills, which is very famous in the whole western region? Tianjuabu. No wonder you have the ability to fight with the 9-star and half-emperor. If Tianjuabu has achieved success in cultivation, you can really do this. Looking at Xiao Yang, who disappeared in the cold wind, the corners of Frost's mouth could not help but slowly show a smile. He whispered in his heart. Immediately, he pulled up Murong Chanxian, who was full of resentment, moved and flew away to the west. "Since the heaven never steps on you, it seems that you are not from the 4 main schools, Xiao Yang. The name seems strange. Can it be them?" On the way of flying, Frost frowned secretly and thought about something solemnly in her heart. Especially when she thought of the so-called them, the look in her eyes suddenly became gloomy. Hiss, hiss. In the cold wind, Xiao Yang's fighting spirit returned to the peak again due to his breakthrough. At this moment, he kept pouring out of the body without money. The gorgeous different fire wrapped Xiao Yang's whole body and rendered him a fireman. The blazing high temperature and the surrounding cold wind were tearing each other over the 9 days, and no one was willing to make concessions. Under such dissipation, Xiao Yang undoubtedly suffered a unilateral loss. After all, the cold wind between heaven and earth is endless. If you don't pay attention, it may affect Xiao Yang's traveling speed at the moment. In order to resist these cold winds, Xiao Yang has to spend his fighting spirit in his body to keep out the cold. The consequence of this is to make Xiao Yang's breath gradually weak. As Xiao Yang got closer and closer to the central area of Shilin's hinterland, he could also feel that the cold wind between heaven and earth was several times stronger than at first. He had traveled for a day. However, the fighting spirit in his body had already consumed more than half. If it were normal, I'm afraid Xiao Yang was on his way day and night for a month, and it was impossible to consume 1/10 of his fighting spirit, not to mention like this at the moment. Facing the cold wind like a wolf from all directions, Xiao Yang's face became more and more dignified. If he continues like this, before he reaches the central area of Darcy Lin's hinterland, he will be completely frozen to death by these cold winds because his fighting spirit is exhausted. It is very unwilling for Xiao Yang. Helpless, Xiao Yang had to put his last hope on Guyo in his body. If the old man doesn't appear again, Xiao Yang will really be hopeless. Old bone, if you continue to pretend to be dead, I will not be able to support it. Old bone, old bone. Xiao Yang frowned and kept shouting in his heart. At the same time, the fighting spirit in his body was more crazy and gushed out of his body. The Tianjue step under his feet had been performed to the extreme. The terrible speed made Xiao Yang look like an invisible lightning in the void. But Rao is so, but Xiao Yang still can't cross the hinterland of Shilin Mountain before his fighting spirit is exhausted. Hey, little guy, didn't you tell others that you can go alone before? Why are you so discouraged now? Finally, when Xiao Yang was about to give up, Jiuyu's light laughter with a little banter came out of Xiao Yang's body. Hearing this familiar voice, the look on Xiao Yang's face suddenly coagulated slightly. Soon, Hope rose again in his heart and hurriedly said to Guyo excitedly, Jiyu Lao, there's no time to joke now. If you don't do it again, I'm afraid you'll have to explain your life here. Hearing Xiao Yang's voice, Jiyu couldn't help laughing, and immediately joked. Why, our magnificent Yang Emperor, a man in heaven who can't do anything with different fire, should explain that he is in this ice and snow today? Ha ha. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang felt helpless. He glanced around the world and said solemnly to Jiyu, I don't know what the hell exists in this place. It can release such a terrible cold. Even my strange fire can't be restrained. If it weren't for this, I wouldn't be so embarrassed, alas. As soon as he felt the terrible cold wind on Sunday, Xiao Yang immediately cried bitterly in his heart. Since his cultivation, Xiao Yang's different fire has been unfavorable. Even in the face of opponents whose strength is far better than Xiao Yang, different fire can help Xiao Yang, but now, in front of this cold, Xiao Yang's different fire is eaten for the first time, and it still has no power to refute. Of course, if the bone spirit cold fire as the Numenon shot, the result would be different, but now the pain is bitter, and the bone yu in Xiao Yang's body doesn't seem to want to shoot. Hey, smelly boy, if you can easily suppress the cold wind, it's strange. Hearing Xiao Yang's slightly gloomy words, the bone yu in his body smiled and scolded Xiao Yang. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang couldn't help but be a little stunned. He frowned slightly and asked Jiyu again. Old bone, what do you mean? Boy, haven't you been looking for that thing all the time? Hey, seriously, your boy's luck is really good. I told you before entering the mountain. After entering the mountain, I've met it so soon. Now, such a thing is close in front of you. Jiyu chuckled. In his words, he couldn't help feeling surprised at Xiao Yang's bad luck, and at the same time, his heart couldn't help pouring a little complex color. Jiyu Lao, I still hope you can make it clear. According to what you say, I really can't remember for a moment. For Guyo's smile, Xiao Yang was full of sadness. He felt incomparable doubt about the unclear words in his heart. Hey, it seems that you really can't remember, then I'll remind you again, Ice Elixir. Huh. The voice in Jiyu's mouth just came out, and the look on Xiao Yang's face was a moment of coagulation. The body flying forward on the void also stopped in the void. At this moment, even the whole heaven and earth stopped for a moment. At the moment, in Xiao Yang's heart, there are even more stormy waves. Endless surprises are like tides in Xiao Yang's heart. After Jiyu's hint, Xiao Yang immediately understood what the thing in Jiyu's words was. Between heaven and earth, things that can suppress different fires. They are naturally raised and overcome different fires. They are considered by the world to be the most yin and cold power between heaven and earth. Ice spirit cold liquid. Bingling cold liquid. Until after a long time, Xiao Yang said slowly word by word. Bingling cold liquid is the most important medicinal material for refining Bingling pill. At the same time, Bingling cold liquid is also the most key thing for Xiao Yang to swallow strange fire. Xiao Yang originally thought that with the rarity of this thing, he was afraid that he could only get it by going to some large auction houses, but what he never thought was that this treasure of heaven and earth would be in the hinterland of Shilin Mountain. It's no wonder that the cold wind in the hinterland of Shilin can suppress the strange fire Xiao Yang is most proud of. According to Jiyu's words, that thing is close to Xiao Yang at the moment. Is it difficult? Jiyu Lao, do you mean that Bingling cold liquid exists in these cold winds? This video will end here.